must be made.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to Dad Talk Today. It's Sunday night. This is the most that the community has seen Dad Talk Today in a very long time. So just saying, and we have a special guest in the house, someone I've known for the past couple of years, and finally, so honored to be able to share her with you. Miss Ashlynn Weza. Ashlyn, how are you doing?
Not too bad. How are you guys?
Doing okay. So it's kind of ironic. I don't know if you remember the first time we talked. So I had this trip that I did up Northwest with Robert Mast, where we did the whole state of Montana, Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. I literally called every single supervised visitation center there, trying to get a meeting with them to talk about what happened with John and how we could prevent these custody exchange murders. And I remember calling you and talking to you, and you said, well, you know, I was the one that worked with John. I had no idea. When we talked.
Really?
No, I had no idea. Like what we ended up talking about, that was something I had never heard of. So just to familiarize yourself with everybody that is watching right now, I know they saw you testify with the case, but tell everybody who you are and your background with children and supervised visitation.
Okay. Well, I'm Ashlynn Weza, and I have done supervised visitations for about 13 years. I've worked for myself plus 2 other visitation agencies, which is where I started. And I have done anywhere from CPS cases to family court cases. I've seen a lot of different things over the years.
Seen some stuff.
Yeah, I started out as just a foster parent that was helping kids that way. And then, our foster kids would get picked up for visitations, and it was something that was interesting to me and something that I wanted to be a part of. So I found out how I could start doing the visits and went from there.
Yeah.
And I quit being a foster parent, but kept doing supervised visits.
There you go. Can you tell me about the first time? Well, before you met John, this is what I thought was interesting about this case is it was Becky that reached out to you and that got your services first, correct?
Yeah, I received a call, and she was just inquiring on what services I offered and if I did. She asked me if I had done supervised visits for the state, and I said yes, that I'm contracted and I do visits for Washington. And she said, well, could you provide visits for a case in North Dakota? And I said, well, I could probably provide visits. I don't know how it would work because I'm not contracted through North Dakota. So she told me to contact Sherry Stevens, which was the social worker on the case. And I basically went from there with that. But when she contacted me, she was the one that told me about what she was going through and what the kids were going through and what needed to happen for the visit, what she was looking for visits and stuff. And then, like I said, from there, I contacted Sherry and got the ball rolling. And Sherry said, her thing was one of my concerns is she didn't know that they could pay me to do the visits because I'm not one of their contracted agencies and stuff. And so she said that she was going to talk to John and then see what he wanted to do, let him know, hey, we've got this agency that we can use. We can't pay for it because she's not contracted with us, but here's your options.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't much after that she called me back and he says he'll pay for him himself and stuff. So he would like to get that going. And so then she gave me his contact info, and from there I contacted John and we got the ball rolling.
There you go. I mean, John was motivated, ready to go. He wasn't waiting around, tried to get the ball rolling. But just for the audience, because this is why I said the attorneys did such a good job on this case, because the timeline, Ashlyn, you're familiar with this. John's timeline was huge. so many events that happen, and keeping up with it
Yeah.
is a challenge in and of itself. He had went to another center before coming to you there in town, and
Yeah.
allegedly, okay,
He went to New Beginnings was the other agency that he had told me about.
yes, and allegedly, to my knowledge, if I get this wrong, Ashlyn, correct me. John was going to go there, and just to give an idea of what John went through, guys, John went there, and because he had been through the allegations, when he showed up to the visit, as I'm told, his daughter ran up to give him a hug. Oh my God, Daddy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And when he did that, because
Yeah.
he went to the allegations, they literally shut the place down, said meeting's over, and called the cops and told John, you
Yep.
got to get out of here. And John
Yep.
said, I'm not going anywhere. I just drove 13 hours to see my kids, and she ran up and gave me a hug. But because he
Yeah.
had been accused, that was enough to just shut it down, and they treated John like a piece of trash.
They did. And, so we have certain guidelines that were in place for sexual assault cases. And I went over those very clearly with John. He didn't even bat an eye at any of them. He was very compliant with everything. He never, he never was like, well, that's crap. I'm not going to do that. I don't think I should have to. He argue anything. He just did it. And so,
when
yeah.
when you were having your conversations with Rebecca, was there anything in the first conversation or subsequent conversations that made you kind of pause a little bit? Like, I don't want to lead you on, but that made you go, something ain't right here, or did it just sound like a normal call?
To be honest, it sounded like a normal call just because
Okay.
I've talked to other,
So, man,
moms calling to set up visits, and it was kind of similar to those, just concerned mom. She was very, I just want the best for my kids. I want them to be able to have time to see their dad. And it was a very different conversation than what I was getting shortly after starting.
right.
Hmm.
It just
That
to
was when I picked up on it.
And I just want to get this out there just to bring any misconceptions that might come in on this case or Ashlyn's involvement. It's a miscellaneous YouTube. He said, why wasn't this lady screaming from the rooftops at the first trial or before?
Pay attention.
Ashlyn, I definitely mentioned Ashlyn and her involvement. You didn't get subpoenaed.
Nope.
So, but you would have
I
came
was
if you had been subpoenaed, obviously.
100%.
But
100%.
you weren't subpoenaed. So we can't put that on
No.
Ashlyn.
No. That was something, the family and I talked about quite a bit, and it didn't make it to that. I was very hopeful that they would, because I do feel like what I had the experience of with him was important.
Well, oh, I do too. I believe it would have made all the difference in the world. But just to kind of get the viewers kind of the scope of everything. And again, the timeline's huge. Even the covering of the timeline with our podcast is huge. When it came to the first trial, they did not want to go into the sexual allegations because they knew that was all the defense had, and they were going to try to plant a seed of doubt. I think that was a very big mistake because when you don't go into it, it looks like you're trying to hide something. And if they would have just went into it like the attorneys did this past week, John would have been vindicated because he did everything the right way. Everything was documented. But hindsight's 2020. I mean, in the lawyer's defense, they literally had a video of Jim saying, I premeditated this. It was planned. I guess in their mind, they thought that's the burden of proof. We don't have to prove anything more. But that's not exactly how it went. And anybody from now on, if you go through sexual allegations, you need to pay attention to that because don't try to stay away from that. If you try to not touch it, somebody's going to do it, and it might not go so well for you.
Right. Yeah.
But tell us about your first visit with John, or your first interactions with John Ashlyn. What was your impressions of him?
Well, so I wasn't quite sure what to expect, just because I knew what Rebecca had told me. I knew that there were concerns for sexual allegations, and so I was just watching for anything that might be considered inappropriate, anything that would seem odd that somebody would do with their child. Um, my very first contact with him was without the kids, and he had come in about an hour early for the visit, and we went over all of the visitation guidelines and what he, I guess, what was to be expected of him during visits and what was and was not allowed. And so I went through, I think it's like 4 or 5 pages of guidelines that I created over the years. Because if you don't have it in black and white, then families are like, well, you don't have that there. And I'm like, well, I thought it was kind of implied. So instead, I had to put all of these guidelines out there. I have a spot that they have to initial the bottom of each page stating that they are aware of it. And I read every guideline to them so that way they can't say, well, I didn't see that one. And then they have to sign it at the end. And he was happy to do so. Like I said, he didn't have any arguments about it. He just did what he was asked. We got done a little early and stuff. He just kind of talked about North Dakota a little bit and what it was like there. I think we were talking small talk weather, sort of thing. And then I saw the kids come to the door. And so I said, well, I'm going to go get the kids. And he waited in the visitation room. And I just stepped outside the front door and talked with Rebecca a little bit. She, was telling me kind of their allergies. She was just reiterating that I knew what they were and stuff, and they didn't have that sort of stuff. And then we went inside, and, the kids were a little shy, but having known what John had shared about the last attempt at a visit, it seemed normal to me just because, cop involvement with little kids and just getting to see their dad is scary. And so they were a little shy, and he just talked to him, how are you guys doing? I've missed you. What have you guys been up to? And he just, engaged in conversation, and they quickly opened up, and when they walked through the door, they were both smiling and stuff, but then they quickly opened up. And after a little while, when conversation got going, he asked them, or said, I really missed you guys. Can I have a hug? And both of them were very willing to give him a hug. And, even Ashira kind of sat there and just held on to him, like from this, around the side. And they just kind of talked. And never in that moment, like those first moments, did I feel anything seemed off. It just felt very natural and just loving and
Yeah.
stuff.
During the case, you had to correct Rebecca on kind of the process that children go through. She was saying, let's see, how was she putting it? That the kids would be would be more scared or something like that, and you actually had to correct her and say, well, no, in your experience, this is actually how it works. I don't know if you can kind of highlight or summarize kind of what normally happens, or how did children, when they're in this situation, because I kind of want to talk also about just kind of your experience and things like that, just for the listeners, because some of them may be going through exactly this. They're dealing with a center and trying to get reunification and all that stuff. But yeah, I kind of wanted to get your take on that from your experience.
Well, so yeah, she was saying, when she was questioning me, she was saying, isn't it normal for kids to feel comfortable with something new and then become reserved? And no, it's just the opposite. And I've seen that so many times where kids are more reserved, especially when there's been a length of time between visits. They're, a little more reserved. And then as the visit goes on, they very much so open up and engage a lot more, which is exactly what happened that first visit. Exactly. It couldn't have been more cookie cutter from, I guess you could say, from what I've seen of others.
So,
And then it
like,
was as visits went on, they got rough.
Ah, okay. And that you would say that would be normal. How that when you say you
Uh,
got rough.
um, no. So to be honest, I've never seen a parent go through what he had to go through his visits. Usually, like I said, parents or kids will be apprehensive at first, and then they
Mm,
open up and they play fine. There's no fear, no like hesitation, stuff like that. But with this, there was no fear, no hesitations, and then
mm.
it started turning to um, not the greatest visits. They
And
were hard to watch.
I want to get into this just to show you how attentive Ashlyn was with this case and detailed with the specifics. Really quick though, Ashlyn, I had a question from one of the audience members, and I thought it would be good for you to answer this. Roger Tolbert on Facebook said, "How often do you see?" Which I know you're not doing it anymore, but how often did you see false accusations cases with the sexual abuse?
Um, it just depends because a lot of those were like state cases, so I didn't have anything to do with like the investigations of any of that or really any of the knowledge of those things. I was just
So you really didn't know if it was
providing
false.
visits. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. I did have one other case that had false allegations.
gotcha.
Mm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And it could have been more, but again, you didn't investigate it. You weren't there to find out who was doing what. You were there to report on what you saw, make sure nothing happened during those visits.
Correct.
Something that I thought was really interesting, you talked about at the trial, was triggers that Becky said that the kids would have with them that set them off with their alienation. For
Yeah.
Zane, it was Spider-Man. For
Yep.
Ashira, it was tea parties. And I remember
Yep.
John talking about tea parties and stuff with Ashira. But tell us about that and your experience and what you saw after that. Explain what Becky said would happen versus what you saw happen when John would meet and interact with them.
So she told me that we needed to refrain from him having tea parties with them because it was a trigger, or with the Shira, because that was a trigger for her that would cause her to become very dysregulated, and that things would kind of spiral. That it would trigger emotions that were hard for her, sort of thing. And for Zane, it was Spider-Man, and so I mean, I watched very closely. For these sort of things. And, like I had stated in my testimony, Ashira played restaurant essentially with
Mm.
John, where, she'd cook him up some spaghetti or some tea or not tea, but
Who
coffee
hasn't
and
done that with their
whatever.
kids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, she would bring it over to him and he'd pretend to eat it. And then she'd take it back and ask him what he wanted for dessert. It was very natural. It wasn't like anything was being forced. John followed the lead. He didn't put any ideas there. And like when Ashira would ask him, well, what would you like for lunch? He would say, well, what would you like to cook? Sort of thing. Like he left
Okay.
it up to her versus him putting the idea there. Um, and so for me, I watched that numerous times and I thought, how is this a trigger? And that was in my office, in my visitation office. And then Zane's was Spider-Man. And I can't even count how many times he got that Marvel puzzle out and put it together and stuff. Never once did he even say anything about Spider-Man.
And
But I
Spider-Man
mean,
was all over that puzzle.
yeah. Well, I mean, it was one of the characters on it, yeah,
Okay.
and
Did you
stuff. So it had
share
several.
this? Did you
Yeah,
share this with Rebecca?
um, I don't remember if I brought it to her attention. I just know that I documented it and I brought it up to the social worker.
Hmm.
Because I didn't bring up a lot of the things that she had told me, and then what
Right.
I'd seen to not be true. I more so took it to the social worker,
Gotcha.
and let her sort it out with them. There
Okay.
were a couple things that, something I didn't bring up in my testimony, and I was really kind of frustrated with myself, and it ties into the tea parties with Ashira. There was a visitation that we had at the park where Robert and Sarah Mast were able to come, and they brought the dog Gretchen.
Oh, God.
And so
That's what I was just about to ask you.
Yeah, this visit and this particular thing was something that I think would have been really important to bring up in court, and I meant to,
Absolutely.
and it just completely slipped my mind. But John brought a cooler of things. He brought like sandwiches, and he brought drinks, and he brought, other little snack things in this cooler. Well, he told the kids, if you're hungry, there's stuff here in the cooler. If you're hungry, you can help yourself to it, and there's drinks in there. Well, Ashira was thirsty, and so she went over to the cooler and opened it, and there was one of those, or not one, but there was a couple of those pure leaf teas in there.
Mm-hmm.
She grabbed that tea and hugged it and said, "Tea, we never get tea. I love tea." And she was like running circles around the picnic table, all excited about this tea. But it was,
That was supposed to be
tea
a
was a
trigger.
trigger. Yeah. I didn't see it trigger anything negatively. And actually at that specific visit, I had somebody that I was she was doing an on training visit with me, and she works with kids with various different behaviors. And at the time she had been doing that, and then was also, starting the visits. And so I looked at her and I was like, does any of that look like trigger behavior to you? And stuff, she'd gone to school for this stuff. And she was like, not at all. Not at all. So it just kind of validated that. And so I was kind of upset with myself that I didn't bring that up in court. But the other big significant thing to that was Gretchen. Gretchen was the other significant thing, is those kids saw Gretchen get out of the vehicle, and they're like,
Just their dog.
Mom told, yeah,
Yep.
Gretchen was the family dog that that Robert and Sarah had and stuff after. So it was John and Rebecca's with the kids' dog, and then ended up going to Robert and Sarah. Ashira said, Mom told us Gretchen was dead, that she died. And so they were so shocked to see her. They were very, very shocked to see Gretchen.
Did they
and
ask
happy.
Rebecca?
So
Yeah.
they didn't ask. We visit ended, and we went back to the office, and that's where Rebecca met to pick them up. And the kids were like, Mom, Gretchen was there. And the look on her face, she was mad. She was very mad, very mad.
Wow.
And that's why I'm upset that I didn't bring this up in court. But so there's a couple parts to that why she was mad. She had told me that if
spill the tea, no pun intended.
Right?
Oh my God.
She had told me if family members were going to attend the visit, she needed to know, so that way she could kind of prep the kids for the emotional things that they may go through, and just to prepare them. She wanted to prepare them to see the different family members.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? In my referral that I have from Sherry, it doesn't say anything that I need to notify. So I contacted Sherry and I said, this is what she's wanting. Is this something that I really need to do? And she goes, well, what are your policies on family members attending? And I said, well, I do allow family members to attend. And I said, depending on the circumstances, I allow them to attend the first 30 minutes or the last 30 minutes of the visit. And then, like I said, depending on the circumstances, sometimes I would allow longer. And so, two parts to her being upset is I did not notify her that Robert and Sarah were coming. I wasn't quite sure if the kids would be coming to visit if I said something, but I also was not required. Sherry told me that I was, follow my guidelines. If it was normal for me to notify others that people were going to be there, then to do it. If not, just to continue she goes, do business how you do business.
Which that is
so
something
that's
that
what I did.
Under my skin so much, Ashlyn, because you've gotten to meet the Mast family. Dwayne, I know you got to meet Robert Mast.
Yep.
one of the most beautiful families you will ever meet on the face of
Absolutely.
this earth. If Robert and Sarah were your grandparents, you would be so spoiled
Yes.
and have the most loving
Yes.
grandparents. And
Mhm.
they have not seen those kids since their dad died. And if I remember correctly, if not, I'll admit it later on, but I could swear I heard in the court case, there was a moment where Becky said, in the state of Idaho, there's no grandparents, right? So I
Yep.
didn't have to let them see. And I'm
Yep.
like, what a statement to make. You're
I
basically
picked up on
saying,
that.
legally, I didn't have to anyway. So, oh, well. I
Right.
mean, it was just so
Right.
arrogant. You heard it, Ashley?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, 100%. I picked up on that
God.
quick. Yeah.
And the jury picked
There,
up on it. The jury picked up on it.
there may not be rights, but in her closing argument, she said, do you think I wanted my kids to not have their dad? And it's like, well, okay, so they don't
Yes.
have their dad, but why can't they have their dad's family? Why can't they have their dad's family? If this is something that you didn't want, why can't they have his family? Because his family definitely wants them.
They would let the family see them as long as the family will become a tool in the alienation. If they're going to take up for that parent, there's going to be no connection. That's just the
Right.
way I pick up on it in these cases. One of our really big supporters from the very beginning, I'd like to give a shout out to her, Sarah Johnson on YouTube. She said, I would like to hear more about the disruptive behaviors that John faced. As hard as this is going to be to do, people need to hear this. They have heard how great of a parent John was. They hear about the distance that he went, 13 hours there to see the kids. How long were those visits, Ashlyn?
3 hours max.
So he would 13 hours to get 3 hours max, then 13 hours back. The guy really didn't even have any time to rest on the weekend after working,
No.
but he did that because of how he loved his kids. And so you would hope that that was good, meaningful time with those kids. But that wasn't always the case with John when he got to see the kids. What were those visits like, Ashlyn? Let's hear the reality of what it's like, a father visiting children going through, this type of upbringing.
Those visits were rough. But so just kind of go back to his travel. He traveled through the winter months, and sometimes his travels were over 15 hours.
And it's
One
not
direction.
I've done it.
One direction. And
when he died, and we went to the funeral, we started off in Washington. And then when we got to Libby, Montana, which is where they held his funeral, we drove that drive actually from Lewiston all the way over to North Dakota. And
wow.
in nothing but ice. It was minus 33.
Yep.
And we could not do the speed limit at
No.
all. I think it took us 17 hours to get there. And
Yeah.
that's only stopping for gas. We didn't stop any other time. It was too cold. We tried to get there as quick as we could. So, yeah, I could imagine that is a long, long drive, guys. And in that winter weather, that is extreme.
Yeah. And John was amazing at communicating. Like,
oh, yeah.
he would communicate, I'm about this far out. And he was always early for visits. And he'd say, I'm going to get there and I'm probably going to lay down in the van for a little bit and take a nap and stuff, which, man, I don't blame him after a trip like that, because oftentimes he was coming after work. And so he was working and then making that trip and then would come see them. And on his time, he would get 3 hours one day and 3 hours the next day is how it worked out. And then, his 13 to 15 hour drive back. But, that commute is just one piece of it. We talk about how long it took him to get there and that anticipation for his visits. But then he gets there and he wants nothing more than to have amazing time with his kids.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to be able to give them a hug. He tells them that he loves them throughout the entire visit. Those kids, it went from smiles on the faces and, willingly greeting him with a hug to John would ask for, Shira, can I have a hug? Or Zane, can I have a hug? And nope, my mom says I don't have to. And just very cold faced on it, not not even hesitant. Just nope. My mom says I don't have to.
And not just with John. Robert and Sarah said they did the same exact thing to them.
That
They weren't
and that
allowed
one.
to hug their grandparents, guys.
No, that one, that too was really hard, to watch because, like you said, Robert and Sarah
Oh my,
are a couple of the sweetest people,
they don't
and
make them like that anymore, guys. Literally, you would just have to meet them to see what we're
yeah,
talking about.
yeah. I mean, everybody's family with them. It feels like,
Oh God, yes.
And
How
to
did
see
John
them,
handle that? Like,
which part?
well,
His parents or him?
well, when the kids would say, "I don't have to give you a hug because my mom said I don't have to," what? How did John at least to, how did
He would
he
just say
handle
that's okay. He would just say that's okay. You don't have to. If you don't
That's
want to, it's
the hardest
okay.
part. It gets worse,
Yeah,
Dwayne. It gets worse.
yeah.
And he handled
You
it like that all the way through.
Yeah, you never would see him, get upset. Like, no, I am your dad, come give me a hug. There was never any of that. It was just like, that's okay. What would you guys like to do? And then he'd move on to the next thing of what would you guys like to do? Or are you guys, I'm kind of hungry. Are you kind of hungry? And well, where would you like to go for lunch?
What was that doing to you personally? I mean, I know professionally you had to sit there, be stoic, and right, but personally, as a human being, what was that doing to you?
It killed me. It absolutely killed me to watch it. There were times that I would tear up during visits without him even knowing, just because to watch a man go through everything he had been fighting to try to get, he gets this time with his kids, and it's not what you would think a visitation should be.
And
And
guys, just remember, Becky is the one that hired Ashlyn.
yeah,
So
she's the one that found me.
She's the one
She's the
that
one that
found
found me.
her and started this, and then she's telling you what she saw. Anyway,
Yeah.
keep going.
It got to the point where those kids were hitting him, kicking him, spitting at him, throwing stuff at him, writing letters, little notes to him that were mean. You're not my dad. I don't have to call you dad. It I want to bring up one little piece that it was brought to my attention by Robin about John's upbringing and the, being raised in the Amish community. And she didn't have some great things to say about that. And then she talked about, their beliefs and their culture. Well, the kids started coming into visits and they were calling John a swayer. You're just a swayer and stuff. And it was very cult like that they were talking to him. And a swayer. Yeah.
What's non-Amish? What does that mean?
I don't 100% know. I do remember I looked it up way back then, but I don't remember what it was. It was just
Someone
something negative.
Influence or control, or who rules or commands. It's another word for a narcissist, which one thing you don't hear me talk about narcissism and narcissists on this channel, just because it has gotten so out of hand. Nobody knows those terms better than the narcissist and the alienators. I'm just going to tell you right. And here's why. Here's them using a term I've never heard. It just sounds like another word for narcissism or narcissism.
Yeah. And I mean, when the way that they were saying it, it was something negative. And
those kids didn't come up with that.
No,
you're talking to 3 grown people here who had to look up the meaning to it.
Right.
Saying, no, come on.
Yeah, exactly. And never once did I ever see John get upset. He never was frazzled. Like, I'm a mom. I've got kids, and I know when my kids are being rough. It's hard to keep your cool sometimes. Completely, and always, be nice. He never once called him a brat. He never anything. It would just, that's not very nice, guys. And that does kind of hurt my feelings and stuff. And then he would say,
talk bad about Becky, Ashlyn.
Never once, and not even.
He didn't
not
like
even
what
behind
she was
kids.
Doing, but
no,
he would not. I don't know how the guy did it. I have no
I
idea. I'm not that
I
big of
asked
a
him.
fan. You
I
did?
What
asked
did he
him.
say?
Yeah, I did. He said, I asked him and said,
What's the
how do
secret?
you keep so calm through this? And he goes, it's not their fault. It's not their fault. This is what they're being told. And I said, you're probably not wrong, but I don't know. He says, I know it's not their fault. These kids weren't like this before and stuff. And he goes, just listen to the things that they're saying. And to be able to have that much self-control over, I mean, I know inside it was eating him. It was eating at me. I couldn't
You're
do
probably
It
it.
over
makes you
smacking
feel.
yourself like, what are you doing? Quit talking to your dad that way.
Yeah. And
Guys,
there were times that I did have to intervene and tell him, you guys, no, you can't hit your dad. We're not going to be hitting him. That's not how we handle things here at visits. And not only myself, but there were a few others that, if I wasn't able to do a visit, then they would supervise it. They had to step in too and stuff. And there was only, aside from myself, there was only 3 others that had ever supervised the visits. And all of them were like, I don't even understand. I don't know. This poor man, like he went through so much. So it's not even just me seeing it.
Right.
3 others. And if they were on here, they would all say the same things. He endured a lot and
Oh,
he
absolutely.
handled it so well. I mean, I wish I could handle things as well as he does or did, honestly, with that. Um, and even like you brought up that he never said anything bad about Rebecca.
No.
Even when the kids weren't around and they were gone and stuff, nothing ever.
So interesting. Uh, I was really tired, but I do this a couple of times per year. I go back and reread my messages with John, our private messages. And one that really struck me was on there, even with the divorce, he didn't want to speak ill of her. And he said he believes that they could have worked it out if it had not been the family court. He felt like the family court is what teared apart their marriage, even with all that other stuff that happened. John wanted the best for Rebecca. He
Yeah.
really wanted the best for her, even after she did all of this and made sexual allegations, physical allegations. He still wanted her to be happy, healthy, and wanted what
Hmm.
was best for her because he knew that was what was best for the kids. He was a
Yes.
peacemaker. He did not, he
Yes.
wasn't the one that made the conflict. And that really stands for the whole Mast family. And that's what I said, like, to know who John is, you got to meet his family and his parents. I
Yeah.
watched last week in that courtroom as Robert Mast sat maybe 10 feet away from the
Yeah.
person that killed his son in cold blood. And he looked at him and said, I have forgiven him. I forgive him the day it happened. And I'm truly worried about his soul.
Yeah.
Who else could have done that? I don't.
He's told me.
You would
Yeah.
have to restrain me if you did that to my kid. I'd be jumping over there and I'd be trying to get my hands on you. I'm just being honest with you.
Yeah.
It would be very hard, but to look at him and to offer that forgiveness. And here's the thing, guys. Some people might say stuff like that and they don't really mean it or trying to make themselves look good. They 100% mean that.
Yeah.
100.
I want to be a better person being around them. I am
Right.
not the best at forgiveness. And even this past
Yeah.
week, I went and took extra steps because I was inspired by them. I got to start working on my forgiveness.
Hmm.
And again, like I said, he 100% meant that. And that's the way that John was. He
Yeah.
really wanted the best for her. He did not talk down on her. He talked about the things that she did, but
Right.
it's just tragic all the way around. You've got so many kids out there who have dads that don't want anything to do with them. And then you got the ones like John who would go to the end of this earth to be with his kids. And he ended up getting killed. There was nothing that
And
John could have done at the end of the day to make this different.
the sad thing is too is I was upset I didn't bring this up too. He knew it would end that way. He had shared that with me and said, I don't have a good feeling that it's going to end well he goes, but I'm not going to quit fighting. I'll keep fighting for my kids. And I just kept, encouraging him, just keep doing what you're doing. Don't
I
give
had
up.
that
And
feeling
he
too.
said I could never give up.
Now you
He could
testified
never.
on it that you didn't think that it would end the way it did, but I mean, now now the jury's gone and it's all over. Did you? I mean, from everything you saw, did you think that it was going to end up this way, or do you think that it was just going to
So
go?
I guess,
Are you talking about the court
I'd
or
hope,
him being killed?
Him being killed, him being murdered. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I figured. Okay.
I knew it was a very strong possibility because James flat out said it to me. He stood at the back of that vehicle and said, if he ever gets these kids unsupervised, I'll kill him. And I was
How long
shocked
before
at
John
that.
being killed was that, Ashlyn?
Roughly 2 years,
Okay,
just
roughly two.
just shy of 2 years.
Do
Yeah.
you think that's something that he would not have said around Becky? I would imagine that was something
Oh,
he had probably said before. We can't say that; it would be hearsay. You don't have to answer that,
right.
but
Not in court.
keep
Well,
going. So 2 years prior to
here's
this,
here's my thought on that piece. Their family, they talk probably a lot more candid than you do with strangers. And
absolutely.
he openly said it to me without me saying a single thing about it. First, maybe second time I ever met him. I want to say it was pretty close. I think I met him the very first time, but then the first time he brought those kids by himself, he said it to me. And
Okay.
so, I mean, and I'm a stranger. He doesn't know me, didn't know me at all. So
Right.
he had no problem saying it to me. He told me, I'm trained in weapon, like he does weapon arms training, and he was in the military. He knew what he was doing, and he would make sure it would get done.
Are you sure he wouldn't
And I
forget
just,
about all that? Like, because he had short and long term memory loss.
Oh no,
yeah,
I'm
no,
going to
no.
answer for her. I plead
I
the
had to
fifth.
dig. I had to dig
I
on
plead
that.
the fifth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's good.
I didn't know what to think of it because I'm like, that's pretty bold to say. Like, do you realize I'm a mandated reporter on stuff like this?
Yeah.
And
Had anything
so
like that ever happened before with you?
I've never had somebody say something like that to me. And I really didn't know what to say because I was just like,
What do you
yeah, yeah. I mean,
You just said you would kill
I,
somebody.
yeah. And I'm just like, well, at that point, and he's sitting there telling me, these kids can't be left unsupervised with him. He knew that John was in that building by himself, and those kids walked in there, and he's still talking to me. And I kept like walking further and further away, making my way to the door. And then he said that, and I just kind of like stopped for a second. And the only thing I could say is, well, the kids are inside, so I should probably get inside with them. Because I was like, I don't even know how to take that other than I reported it to the social worker.
So that's what I was
That
going
was
to say. I
something.
remember. Yeah. So, tell
Mhm.
us about that report afterwards. So you reported that he said that to the social worker.
No, I called Sherry Stevens and let her know. And then I also put it in my narrative to her. So it was in black and white as well.
Do you know if they ever did any follow up on that, Ashley?
I have no clue. Once I
That
told
was a
them, I don't know where it went.
that was a terroristic threat right there. And to
Yeah.
my knowledge, that's a felony.
Yeah. But I mean, it was scary. And, I heard Rebecca say, oh, yeah, he'd say that. That's just a loving father sort of thing. I have never met a father that would say something like that repeatedly. And then to tell strangers that kind of stuff, that's not a lovingly father sort of thing to comment to make.
Wait, she
It
told
had
you
me
that?
worried.
She
And
told
no,
you
no,
that
she
like
was
in a
saying,
casual conversation or during the court case? Because she
no,
said she had
during
never
the
heard
court
that.
case.
Oh, okay. I'm like going, wait
No,
a second.
during this last week, she was saying, "Oh, well,
Okay.
yeah, I'd heard him say it in a loving father sort of way." And I just thought to myself, how's that a loving father sort
Yeah,
of way? Like,
I love your father.
don't get me wrong, fathers are pretty darn protective, but
Yeah.
to make that kind of comment and then to hear that he'd said, "Oh yeah, I've probably said it 100 times," and to know that he said it to me, like, that's not a loving father sort of thing, in my opinion. there.
Yeah.
Well, the
How would it-
contradictions was all over the place too, because I remember like Jim in his closing arguments was like, she had nothing to do with this. This was all me, and this was because I thought he had sexually molested those kids. Well, you got all of the investigators and everybody else that said they investigated it. It did not happen. It was not true, and you had to get that from Becky because she was the one telling you the allegations. And the allegations is why you killed them, but you're saying she had nothing to do with it. How could she not
Right.
have nothing to do with it if that's who you heard those allegations from? It was a contradiction right
Mhm.
there.
Oh, God,
Because
That was my
everybody
thought.
was telling you, Jim, it was not true.
Well,
Like, and I know he kept saying, in my heart, I feel it deep down in my heart. Well, these guys are professionals. These guys, I mean, they're the same professionals that they wanted to investigate the things, I mean, they weren't getting the results they wanted. I mean, again, like you said, Rebecca found me and didn't get the results she was wanting with that, because she was wanting me to say, that there were negative things going on. And I remember telling her, well, actually, that's not going on.
Did she
Well,
ever
actually, the
express
kids
that
did have
anger,
fun.
or did she ever
Oh,
express any negative feelings with you when she wasn't getting what she wanted?
she would get worked up and get, I guess you could say, huffy with me. And then the visit that Robert and Sarah attended and finding out that Gretchen was there, she couldn't get her and the kids out of there fast enough. She was mad. She was definitely mad. She was threw the backpack inside and then, closed the door, and she was definitely upset. She never came out and said, I'm mad, but she
Do it.
was voice was elevated, that became a little more hostile, and she couldn't get out of there fast enough.
I'm curious, what were your personal feelings on James and Rebecca's relationship? Like, how did those two interact with each other? Because
That's
there's
been
a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk
curiosity.
about.
That's
I'm
been a
sorry?
curiosity of mine, Dwayne.
Burning question. Yeah.
I know where you're
Very
going with it.
close. Yeah. It definitely kind of felt like one couldn't operate without the other, almost.
Really?
Just because it was like if one was there, the other was there. Not every time, but and I don't know if it was she had him come along because she needed the comfort and support. I'm not exactly sure on that. But it was interesting to me, for sure.
So, someone that we haven't brought up yet that I don't think gets enough attention on this, and I'm going to watch my mouth when saying that. Robin, tell us about meeting Rebecca's mother and your thoughts about Robin.
Honestly, my my first encounter with her is they had come to pick up the kids. She got out and was talking to me. So the kids and Rebecca were in the vehicle. And that's when, we're in front of my office, and she kind of had me backed into a corner, but not a corner, like the doorway of my office.
Right.
And that's when she was like, do you know that he was raised Amish, right? And so, well, he was raised, but he doesn't practice it anymore, from my understanding. And she said, well, do you know anything about the Amish community? And I said, honestly, no, I don't actually. And so she said, well, let me tell you a little bit about the Amish community. And I mean, am I okay to say everything that she told me? Because it was okay.
People need to hear this. And I have counseled with the Mast family regarding this, and so I'll have a follow up to it once you say it. But yes, please tell them everything.
It was pretty grotesque, and I was pretty disgusted by it. But she said, in the Amish community, that the fathers will molest their daughters. They will rape their daughters and tell them, well, daddy just needs to teach you how a man should treat you and how to be treated by a man. And then they would do these things to their children. And at the end of the day, they would have their family meeting, essentially, and say, well, daddy's sorry. And once Daddy apologized, it was never to be talked about again and couldn't be brought up. And so it was like it never happened, sort of thing. It was brushed under the rug. And then that's when, she kind of talked about their culture that she is in. She kept using the word culture, and I kept thinking cult, because what she was saying just was along those lines. And it was almost like the Amish against this cult sort of thing is how it felt, very much so. But she really just kept repeating herself on the gross things that would occur supposedly in the Amish community. And I had nothing to rebuttal it with, because I didn't know anything about it.
Right.
And she wanted to know like my credentials and what qualified me for doing supervised visitations, and she wanted to know everything
She's
that
the
I had
expert.
done. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
had, because she worked for, the YWCA and things like that, and she knew experts in this realm and that realm, and she kept bringing things up to me, and I said, these are not therapeutic supervised visitations. You're right, I am not a therapist, because these are not therapeutic supervised visitations. This would be a whole different thing if that was the case, but that's not what's ordered. Ordered is supervised visits. I'm not here to provide therapy for them. I'm here to observe their interactions. And that's exactly what I did, and document it and send it to the social worker. And from there, once Sherry Stevens was out of it and they closed their case, my reports were all for John, because he was the paying client. He was the one that had unlimited access to my reports.
So
And I know Rebecca actually, let me add really quick. Rebecca did request those reports, and I denied giving them to her because she was not the paying client. She wasn't the one paying for the services. Those were John's reports. They were his services.
This is just my opinion. Okay. I'm not stating this as fact. Again, opinion. Out of the three, I believe she's the shot caller. Robin? Yes. I believe she's the leader.
I felt that too.
I believe Jim was he called himself the fix it man. I think he was just the do it boy. He's like, what? Man, I said numerous times amongst just, with my friends, it's like, he is a straight up dumbass. There was, sorry for using that word, but there were several times she called him a convict. She literally asked to be put on the lawsuit with the Mast family against his dad. And I heard him talking numerous times when court wasn't going about, I feel so bad for that girl. She's going through it and her stress and all that. And I'm like, dude, she's sitting here crapping all over you. And you're acting like you've got so much sympathy. I think he was just the little errand guy, I believe. Robin, the mom, kind of like was the shot caller.
Marionette. The marionette puppet. Yep.
She said jump, and he said how high. Okay. So I think there was more there. We'll leave it there, and you guys can kind of put this together. But I do want to touch on something really quick, because it's in going back to what you was talking about with the Amish and their beliefs. Okay. Before I say that, though, there was a Christian church not far from my house. I remember growing up. It was really weird. It was an African-American church. And I remember seeing the women around town. They had to wear these certain dresses and these green hair coverings. And come to find out, what I was told growing up, that when the girl would reach puberty, that the pastor slept with all of the women in the church. And that was to purify them as they would get older. That church
was something Robin brought up.
That church ended up getting burned down, but that was technically, I guess, a Christian church with a regular faith, not Amish. But that just goes to show you, you're not going to take that and talk about all the Christians, because that is a very thick cult-like thing that was going on. Regarding the Amish, I remember talking to the Mast family about this. There is a very, very little tiny percent inside the Amish community that has done something like that, Ashlyn. It is not the Amish at all altogether, but there has been some stuff that's happened like that inside of the Amish. And you cannot just paint the Amish with one brush. There are so many subsets of Amish. You have Schwarzentroopers that are like, no electricity, no tractor, no car. They can't look at themselves in the mirror because that creates a vain image. It's like the strictest of the strict in the old world, old order, they call them. And then you have the ones that are kind of like beachy Amish. They can have a car or they can have a cell phone, but they can only use it at certain times. There's lots of different subsets in there. But to paint all of the Amish with that brush, like that's who they are, is so false. You've got your extremes and your cults in every single lifestyle out there, but there has been some of that happened. But the Mast family or majority of the Amish have nothing to do with anything like that.
Right.
But she was painting that picture for you for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Most people on the outside, they don't know that information. So they might just take whatever you're telling them. They had a narrative to paint, and that's it. And again, the ringleader, I believe, where it all started from the very beginning. My opinion, but I'm entitled to my opinion. So
and that was, you talked about the purity. That was something that she brought up with it too. Is that was one of the reasons why they did that. But as she was saying this stuff to me, it was almost like my reaction to it kind of made her embellish more on it and would get more just almost comical with it, just the things that she was saying, even though no part of it was funny. But it's just, she was like, oh, okay, she's kind of listening to this part. Maybe I can go a little further here. Because, I didn't tell her, oh, no, I don't think that's how it is. I was just like, oh, really? Yeah, that's pretty gross. That's awful sort of thing. Who am I to argue it? I don't, like I said, she asked me if I knew. I told her no. So I just let her tell me. And again, I reported that stuff to Sherry Stevens, the social worker in North Dakota.
Maybe there was a medical thing behind that, but I believe the reason for the glasses is she didn't want to have to look that family in the eye after the pain that's been endured off of all them lies.
Yeah, again, just complete speculation. My opinion of that was your eyes tell a lot when you're telling a lie. And if you can't see the eyes, then you can't tell if she's lying or not. That judge, they offered to turn those lights down, and she'd rather have them glasses on. And again, that's just my opinion. Oh yeah, because the lights had just been turned down for
like video.
Joe. I think it was Joe was showing videos or something like that. And so the lights had been dimmed for that. And then they turned them back up. And that's exactly what it was, because James had just been on the stand. So the lights were dimmed while they were showing videos, and then they turned them back up. Rebecca called her witness, which was Robin. They turned she came in, and the clerk even stood up and was ready to dim those lights again. And she says, no, I'm fine with these. I'll keep these on. I'll be okay.
Wow.
So we've had a couple of questions come in from the people about certain aspects of the case. And guys, let me tell you, tomorrow night, Kevin Hickey, one of John's attorneys, and he was involved with John before John got killed. He was the one that helped John get custody back of his kids. He'll be on tomorrow and can answer some of those. But if you guys got some questions for Ashlyn about those visits or what went on, put them down in the comments. I just want to ask you real quick, Ashlyn, everything that you've put out there. Is there anything else about John, the type of parent he was, or what he endured inside of those visits you would want the world to know about?
I think I just can't stress enough how loving he was to those kids, and how all he wanted to do was have time with them. And because of, they said it best, desperation, deceit, all that, his time with those kids was muddied, and his time that he looked forward to was essentially, taken from him, the visit that he should have had, because other people wanted it to go another way. I mean, I can't even say that is speculation. These kids were saying it. Well, grandma told me this. Well, mom told me this. And in my visitation reports, I had some very lengthy reports and very detailed reports because I knew how messy this case was. And I
Yes.
knew that there was lots of court proceedings involved. And um, so it wasn't enough for me to just say, well, this is what they talked about. I literally quoted the conversations verbatim, what was being said. So when you read those visitation notes, it's like you were right there in the room to know exactly what was going on. And Kevin said, he goes, that's exactly what I saw when I read them. And you can see and feel, John was never upset about it. Like he was never angry with the kids. He was, he would just say, okay, guys, let's not do that.
I don't know how
Please
he did
don't
it.
hit me. Please don't hit me. I don't really like being hit. I mean, just like that. It wasn't like angry at all.
Spit on,
Um,
being hit. What were some of
mhm.
the verbal things that would be said to him, Ashlyn?
Oh, we hate you. Oh, they did bring up, you did bad things to us. You did bad things. So not only was he being accused by Rebecca, but then these kids are saying it in these visits too. And so he's got to, like I said, he wants these visits to have time with his kids, and he's got these accusations coming at him again. And, he would just say, I'm sorry that you've been told that, because they'd say, mom told me or grandma told me.
Right.
And he'd just say, I'm sorry that you've been told that. And
I
his heart
was,
would break for them.
oh yeah. When we was eating with the family the other night, it just kind of rushed over me because there's a lot of things when people are talking about their cases. I go back to myself and thing I've experienced. Like I remember going through that. I remember going through that. But there is so much about my case, which was nowhere near as bad as what John went through. But there was so much about, and not just about that case, just, I've been through divorces and other stuff. There's so much I went through that people don't know about because I just kept it
Mm-hmm.
inside and bottled it up. And as I was listening and we were talking, I told the family, I said, I don't think anyone will ever know just what all John went through. I'm sure
No.
he told a lot, but there is no telling what that poor man went through, especially like hearing this. Imagine going through these false allegations of being of sexual abuse, physical abuse, all the money that's being spent, the psychosexual test, the lie detector test, the driving back and forth, the money, everything going on, watching the kids that you're fighting for tell you they hate you, hitting you in the face, spitting on you. And John still kept pressing, guys. That's
Yeah.
why it's so important to stand with John. He did everything he could. You could not have done, I could not have done the things that John did. If that would have
And
been my situation, there's no way, Ashlyn. I do not
well,
know how the guy did it. I have a feeling that we don't even know the tip of, barely anything of what he actually went through. I think we're just
right.
scratching the surface.
I think so too. And I want to add, with everything he went to, that 6 hours wasn't enough for him. He wanted more. He kept saying, I
Yes.
need more time with them. I need time with them to see, me, to not have all that negative. He wanted more time. He
To fight
requested
back
it.
that
He
bad
was willing
image.
to pay for it. Yeah. He didn't care how much it cost him. He was going to pay for it, you know. Um, my heart literally just broke for him with all the no's. I mean, not only did he make that trip every time, he didn't know if those kids were going to be there every time, and they weren't there every time. He would make that trip, and an hour before the visit, I'm notified that they're not going to be there. Or, he would make that trip, and because of the COVID stuff, she wasn't going to bring him, practicing social distancing and stuff.
Well, The last interview
And
I had with John, we were talking about COVID and the tricks that was played. I've actually got video of him talking about her canceling the visits and sending back
mhm,
gifts because they supposedly came from China, so the kids couldn't have them.
yeah,
That was a challenging time, and it was COVID-19 was like a gift for an alienator because they could use so many things against these dads to just keep them away from their kids, and they used them. They definitely
and
did.
just I've read back through some of the emails from John and texts from him, and him just pleading to see his kids. He was just begging for help to see his kids.
Mhm.
We got
And
some
I
questions
mean,
in here.
it's hard.
Uh, we got some questions in here for you, Ashlyn. I just will say, Brandy Johnson, she's been a huge supporter of this case from the very beginning. That first question I can't get to right now, Brandy. And when I can answer anything like that, I promise you I will. But I will get to the second question. Brandy said, were the police ever contacted by either yourself or Williston detective when James commented he was going to kill John? I believe you said you called or told the social worker, and you don't know what happened after that, but I'll let you answer that. Did the police get called or anything to your knowledge?
No, I personally did not call the police. I handled it through Sherry because it was kind of more through the state case there. In hindsight, yeah, I absolutely should have called. It- you just sometimes don't know the velocity some words hold. And that is something that I wish I would have done. But at the same time, like I notified Sherry first and then asked
Right.
her, do you think that this is something that I need to do? And she said, well, I will take it and handle it. So from there, I don't know what occurred after that.
Is that something that's kind of messed with you afterwards?
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah. Because I had been out of town and when John had been shot or out of cell service. And when I got back into cell service, my phone had blown up and I had messages from one of the gals that had provided one of the visits for John and said, Ashlyn, have you heard about John? And I wanted to reply, yeah, he gets his kids this weekend because when he got that order in December, he called me right away and told me, Ashlyn, I get my kids. He was so excited for that. And so then I'm messaging with her back and forth and she goes, no, John was just shot. And I was like, no, like I just kept saying no, like couldn't be. And then at the same point, like I'm in disbelief, but at the same time, I'm like, he knew this was going to happen. James said it. And I was like, do you know details on it? And she said she didn't have the details at that point and stuff really, but I just said, James, James told me he'd do it. And I said, it has to be. And then it came out that that's exactly what it was.
Well, I can empathize because I hear these cases all day long. And at that point in time, it was, everybody has the worst case in their mind. So you hear all this stuff and you never
Yeah.
know. Somebody might be telling you something that's really going to happen. But I've had a lot
Yeah.
of them say stuff is going to happen that it doesn't happen. It's just the conflict and the stress that goes on. In hindsight, if we would have knew, I mean, John told me all about his story and I didn't understand how bad it really was, Ashlyn. I
Yeah.
really
It was
didn't. And hearing these details now, they just hit different knowing what we know.
right. See, and that's, this has been a case that from early on when I started seeing what was going on, when I started seeing the his side, her side sort of thing, and
Yeah.
just I guess reading between the lines, this has been a case that has been very I've been very passionate about it. Um because so many times dads are painted as the bad guy. And in this
Thank you.
case, like he had he had all the proof to prove his innocence. And then I never once saw anything that was of concern with him with those kids at all. nothing, especially nothing sexual
Right.
towards them. And just, it's important for people to know that he was innocent.
Absolutely. And that's why the family did what they did, a $6.3 million verdict, guys. But are they expecting that to get handed over anytime soon? It was about
No.
vindicating John.
Yep.
This whole thing was about making sure that the world knew. And what really gets me upset is that local media. They did a really good job at letting John get painted as a guy that he wasn't. And that
Right.
this guy was a hero from coming and trying to block that visitation. That was some of the laziest reporting and journalism I have seen in my life. And that silver bullet is so effective. Once you get accused, no matter what you do, people are going to believe it. But John was the guy that went the extra mile to prove that it wasn't true. We saw this in this past week when it got brought up. But the media, they haven't even tried to correct themselves yet, Ashlyn. It really disgusts me. They're just they're as responsible as some of the ones that was involved with it, if you ask me.
It absolutely disgusted me to read comments, when John was first murdered. And it was so hard for me to bite my tongue and not say anything, because I knew details about the case that the world didn't know and couldn't share and stuff at that point. And so to hear people, or I guess read what people were saying about him, just absolutely was rough. It was hard and stuff because when you know the truth, I mean, it's hard not to set everybody straight, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Just because I couldn't. And so the only thing I could say is he was acquitted of all those charges. That was, I think, the only thing I ever said on it is he was acquitted of those.
It's just the worst thing that a person could ever be painted with. And I don't like talking about this. I've confided in Dwayne that you see on the screen. I was messed with as a kid. So if you think there is any chance in hell I am going to get on this screen or travel this country to go fight for a guy that has any possibility that he could have actually done this to his kids, you're crazy. John was the
100%.
most innocent guy that I have ever seen in my life. I will fight to until I take my last breath for a kid that has been abused. I do not believe in that. But that's why these accusations are so dangerous, guys. It's why they use them. Once these guys get painted as that, it is very, very difficult. And even in John's death, those allegations were still effective against him because the media allowed him to be. They really tried.
Yeah.
What's that?
It was in her closing arguments. I mean, that's after everything. I mean, Rebecca was in her closing arguments talking about abuse and still, in light of all the testimony,
all they had.
Oh yeah,
that was all they had from the very beginning, man. I'm gonna get through some of these questions because I know I've had you going a while. But go ahead.
Something that kind of was something that always stuck with me that John had said was that, you asked me about the I guess relationship or connection between James and Rebecca. Is John had shared that she didn't want them to have contact with the kids. And then that's who she went to with the kids. He didn't go into further details on that, but I mean, it does make it.
So
when Rebecca and John were together still,
right.
She had said to him, and made it clear that she didn't want those kids to be around her family.
Really?
This is coming from John. Yeah.
Oh.
And that's who she went to with those kids. And I had asked, why, and he didn't really go into details other than he did say they're crazy. I mean, that was it. But
okay, so Rebecca didn't want the kids to be around James and Robin and all of them when
initially
they had them.
Until she was, I guess, leaving him. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Deborah Cook here on YouTube said, wasn't it Rebecca that would come up with the excuses for the kids to not have visitation and even cancel some of the visits? I think you had said, Ashlyn, wasn't there times John would be almost there in that 13-hour drive and it would get canceled?
Yeah.
With some BS
That's
excuse.
That's my mom, but yeah.
Okay. Hey, Miss Cook, you
Yeah.
got a great daughter here.
Hi, Ashlyn's mom.
Yeah.
How
So,
many
Yeah, there were
times do you
times,
remember that happening, Ashley?
or I mean, that happens a lot. That sort of things happen a lot. Which is, it's so unfair because, I think it came to a point where John had to prepare himself for these visits because mentally, because of, the things that kids were doing and saying. And to get yourself prepared for that, one might think that when it's not going to happen, that that's a relief. But no, I mean, John wanted his kids. He wanted that time with them. And it wasn't just in-person visits that, she was canceling. John and I would be on Zoom
right.
and stuff and ready to have the visit, and they wouldn't show up,
Interesting.
And again, he's mentally prepared for these visits that didn't end up occurring.
What gets me so bad, though, guys, is the courts allow it. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
many times does this have to happen and keep reoccurring before they put a stop to it? Anthony Michael Perez said, why was it different for John during COVID? I was in the same state. Idaho Supreme Court put out COVID doesn't change visitation. And he also said, my son traveled through the airport during COVID. Why isn't it the same throughout the state? What was different during COVID, Ashlyn? People, thank God. We probably try to forget it for a reason because it was a weird, challenging time. I hope never happens again. Before, to be out of work for, several months and get to stay home sounds great, doesn't it? No, we were
No.
so ready to get out of the house. There's only so many times you can watch the Tiger King. What was different about that time, though? Because it was, I know it was different for everybody, but in your business, much, much different. And it was a tactic that was used.
That's actually a really good question that he brought up because, through my agency, we followed the CDC guidelines, but I was still open for in-person visitations. We had things set in place, for personal protection. We had the ability for social distancing if that needed to be. Gloves, masks, face shields. It was all provided there. Children, parents were all required to wear masks no matter what the thought was on it. If you wanted to see your kid, you'd wear it, sort of thing. Can't tell you if I agreed with it or not, but there were things in place so that families could still have their time together. One thing I had to do was do a COVID screening the night before the visit, and ask, did you have X, Y, and Z of the symptoms? And it would be answered yes. Not by John. John didn't, his were no. And then Rebecca would answer yes, whether it was one kid or the other. And so then from there, we would have to do an electronic Zoom visit.
I think people got to understand that night that he was killed, every trick in the book that could be played against John had been used, and it was exhausted. And that was why we ended up in the situation that we did, because the jig was up. She had to bring the kids that night, and
Right.
the courts was watching. The courts was watching. If you don't show up, you're going to lose custody. Her attorney told her, you have to. That was what, we heard in the court hearing last week. So leading up until that point, I remember John had made a timeline himself, and it was just, oh my God. It's so, this is what guys are going through just trying to be a father. It shouldn't be this way.
Oh, and another thing too, like I don't remember if it was in one of your earlier videos that talked about the letters that John had wrote to his
Mhm.
kids, the journals
Yeah.
and stuff.
It
I mean,
was, and that's actually, that was a weird thing because again, John was on Dad Talk. We had talked previously. I put out one of the notes that he had sent me, before. He had been watching me ever since the very beginning. But those letters, when he came in on Thanksgiving, I did that show. I had my family on Thanksgiving. I still had, one I didn't get to see. It's still a heartbreaking thing. I still haven't seen her. It's been almost 7 years, guys. And I'm not going to go into it. But I did that show for parents to have that outlet to come on there and speak about what it's like on Thanksgiving, not being able to see your kid. John, as he was, anytime I had something going on, was the first one to sign up. And while we were talking, I knew John had been going through it for a while. So I was asking him to give advice to other parents going through it. I was like, John, what could you say to somebody that's going through this, like, and being alienated from their kids? I was like, are you leaving a journal for the kids? Are you writing? He was like, yes, I am. I have been writing them a journal. Not so much anymore. I stopped, but I was writing a journal. So the second that I heard from his family that he had been killed, I remember first, screaming, running around the house, trying to wrap my head around it. And then I grabbed my phone and I said, you need to get to his house right now. He's got letters to those kids. And they found him. They found him, and we posted numerous ones of them. But that just goes to show you the lengths that he was going to,
Mhm.
Any communication he can to those kids, he was going to do it.
So how has this case like changed you or made you think about things maybe differently from both a professional and a personal level?
Well, I kind of, in my opinion, for the longest time, I couldn't say anything from like personal experience in my own life, but I've always said that kids are not a pawn in your relationship.
Say that
I don't
again.
care. I don't care if mom and dad don't get along. Those kids did not choose who their mom was, and they did not choose who their dad was, but they do have the right to have both of them in their lives. And, I now understand that from a personal aspect myself.
Mhm.
And I still 100% that believe that kids deserve to have both parents and stuff, no matter what the circumstances are between you and the parent. Don't muddy the relationship between you and the other parent, or the kids and the other parent, I should say.
Right.
They need to have that.
The only other, like, really, I mean, there's a million questions, but one of the big ones I have is, for a lot of the people that are tuning in have gone through alienation, are in this situation. From your experience, from the professional perspective, like, what things should they be doing? How should they be interacting? I mean, how should they conduct themselves while going through this process from your perspective?
And as far as like the visiting parent being alienated,
Yeah, I mean,
is that what you're
it's
saying?
more a lot of times, they're in this situation, they're in trauma and panic mode and dealing with, people that don't want to hear they don't care, they don't want to listen to their story and all that. How do they, like, what advice or kind of how would you talk to them as they kind of go through this? Because, you testified and you did a lot of things, and I would say there was probably a small part of it, at least, that was what you saw in John. Every interaction you had with John was positive. I'm putting rabbit ears around positive, but it was positive. He had that genuine nature, caring, loving. He was a good father. And I have to believe a part of that is, kind of made you go, look, I want to testify because he made such an impact on me that he
Oh,
cared.
absolutely. Absolutely.
He
Like,
wasn't just
like I said,
case.
I really wanted to be a part of that murder trial because
And I
everybody, or,
wanted you.
I guess I shouldn't say everybody, but there were so many people that
Yeah.
had such a bad picture painted of him. And I saw the complete opposite of that. And I think that it's important for everybody to know that side of it. I think that Sergeant Hendricks also
Yeah.
added a great piece to that as well.
Knocked it
Um,
apart.
I absolutely loved listening to her because it was like, yes, that's what I see too. I had never met her before ever until this last week, this trial. John had told me that he, was doing this stuff, and because John he was not going to rest. He was a
No,
go-getter. He was a
no.
go-getter. So he
Okay.
would kind of vent to me when people weren't getting back to him. And he just wanted, why are we waiting so long? Let's just get this done. I want to move forward. Oh wait, we had court, but the court was just really just kind of set another court date sort of thing.
I
And so he
kind of
was a go-getter. And so for me to see, even what a sergeant who is investigating is seeing just kind of validates more of what I saw to be accurate. And it is important for people to know, you know, he wasn't the man that they painted him to be. He wasn't that monster at all.
well,
And
and I'm sorry.
like you, Eric, if I had even an inkling that
Yes,
he had done any of that, it would probably be a different story for me. I probably, wouldn't be talking as
I
much
searched
because, yeah,
high and low, Ashlyn. I made sure before I get involved in any cases like that. I will say, in my time, I had one dad I talked to one day, and when he was telling me about the silver bullet that he went through, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I could just tell it was the nastiest feeling, even knowing I was on the phone with him. He was trying to act like he was innocent, and you could there's just details that you can feel, and I was like, this
yeah,
don't feel good. But I do my homework because I will never be caught dead taking up for somebody like that. I'm just not going to do it. But that is
100%. Yeah,
it is so important to me, and I know the family and you too, for that town to understand and to know they didn't get the full story. And we didn't
no,
have nowhere near the people this time watching as they did last time. We had about 10 times the amount watching the last trial. And now that that's got out, I'm not going to rest until that
right.
information is out there. I told everybody during the last trial, all the media was there. We only had like one this time. And he was really getting under my skin from the newspaper
Yeah,
because it wasn't what
yeah,
he was saying that was painting the picture. It was what he wasn't saying. I mean,
right.
even when he talked about you being there, he didn't talk about what you said. He just said that you was there. I'm like, there was a lot in there. The fact that he said 2 years prior that he would kill John or the triggers, all that. There wasn't none of that was worth putting in there, especially with this trial, as this guy had been painted this, and now we're getting the other side of the information. Really? I just feel like they got it so wrong. And,
You know,
you know,
to be honest with you, I haven't even read the local media coverage on it at all. Just because I've heard that it was rough to read through, and it probably just
it was.
fire me up some more. But one of the things, like you said, that it's lit a fire underneath you to speak to these guys. One thing that I had hoped for John is that he'd get his kids. I was
That's
there to
it.
provide the time for him, and he was very gracious of that. Um, and the end result was not what anybody was wanting. Um, and for me, being able to speak on his behalf is just one little bit of trying to help him, continue to help him.
That's
And
it. And again,
yeah,
I mean, they got the whole details out this time, and they just told John's story and what he
hmm,
did. That's all you needed to do the whole time. He was the rock star. He had
yeah,
documented everything. Tell his story, and you will see it. And that actually happened. But I mean, I know what I was going to bring up. The last time that media it was the same thing. They kept painting it, this, pedophile, this guy accused of being a pedophile, who their father-in-law came and put a stop to it, made him look like a hero. And after reading that all week and just getting under my skin, I got in touch with the manager of one of the media places, and I just let him have it. I was like, dude, you realize this is a guy that proved his innocence every way he could. And luckily, one of the things that just brought this sense of peace and comfort, knowing that we had it, Daniel Hendricks had sent a letter to Robert and Sarah talking about, she was the one that did the investigation, that John went above and beyond anything she had ever seen, and pretty much unequivocally, without a shadow of a doubt, he was innocent. No charges had ever been brought against John, and that case was dropped. So when I talked to the media, he was like, well, you got anything to prove that? And I was like, well, here's a letter from the investigator. And to their credit, they put out a retraction article, which the media never does, but they knew I had them in a corner. But they put out a retraction article with that letter in it, but it was the last day. The damage was already done. It was already done. You talk to people in that town. The first person I talked to, we went to a restaurant, and the feeling was, well, I would have hated to be on that jury, because if he did the things they said he did, that grandfather, and I'm just sitting there, I'm like, I don't even want this food now.
Look at the facts.
That's what people don't do that. People don't do that.
Yeah.
And again, right now, after all this came out, and it was a big win, because I know that was a big story in that town. Couldn't they report, hey guys, we found out the other side of the story. This wasn't what we thought it was. Last week, there were some very big details. No. So what happened? Dad Talk Today is going to make sure it gets out. I would love to see, I see Chris Bowen said, Holly Gager, we got to get a showing of I Stand with John here in our neighborhood. Guys, I would love for people to start doing showings of the documentaries in their local neighborhood. If I can Zoom and do a Q&A or something afterwards with the people that watch it, that's what the documentary was made for, to let people know, unfortunately, these allegations are being made against these dads. Let me ask, in your experience, Ashlyn, have you seen many moms go through false allegations of sexual abuse from dads?
No. I can tell you that I have not done a supervised visitation with a mother that has had allegations like that, ever, in my 13 years.
People get mad at me when I talk about this and say that what these guys are going through, Eric, it goes both ways. Well, not with that, it doesn't. There's so many things with dads, they just do not get a fair shake. That's not to say moms can't go through these things. We know they do.
Right.
But dads really have the odds stacked against them when they go into the courts. And that's why I speak up for them. And
the dads are more publicized.
That's the worst out of everything you could go through in family court, is to be accused of molesting your kids.
Right. I think that's the lowest of low.
It is. It for 100% is. So, I mean, we got to get that out there in that town, and I promise you we will, but I don't want to keep you any longer. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you for being there for John when not many people were. You could have been just like the rest. He went to get the supervised visitation, and because his daughter hugs him, they shut the place down. He doesn't get to spend time with his kids after going all that way, paying the money, and gets the cops called on him because his daughter wanted to hug her father.
Right.
Luckily, he had you to go to, Ashlyn, and you could see through the BS, and you didn't accept the narrative. And that's a big deal, because a lot of people just accept the narrative. We know they do.
One thing, so John, I never told John what I put in my reports. So we would talk and stuff, but I wouldn't ever tell him what I was putting in my narrative of his visits. And he needed them for part of his, divorce case and stuff. So he went through them. And after getting those reports and seeing them, he's like, you finally give me a little bit of light at the end of that tunnel. People are starting to see it. He had no idea what I was putting in those. I didn't talk to him about it. It was just what I wrote in the notes and stuff. And it wasn't even, a point where he was like, oh no, Ashlyn, you got this wrong or anything. He never said anything like that or asked me to keep anything out of a report ever. And so when he saw those reports, he was just like, you give me that little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. It's dim, but it's there. And so I just encouraged him, keep fighting, don't give up. He has a huge support. I got to meet some of his siblings, and then obviously his mom and dad throughout the visits.
Oh,
They were all so supportive.
you couldn't
And
have a more
just
supportive family.
no, and just they were just as gracious as he was, um, always thanking me for being able to be there for them and making time for them and allowing them to go. And, for me, I was raised around all my family. So family is important to me, myself. And, again, just because mom and dad may not get along, why does the rest of the family not get to be involved? And so, there was nothing telling me that those family members couldn't be there. And John was requesting him, and he was the paying client. So it was granted. And, they didn't get a ton of time. So oftentimes I did allow them to stay longer than that 30 minutes if they had it, if they were able to stay that long. Were they fully engaged with those kids the entire time? No, but they got to watch them. They got to talk to them. They got to tell them that they loved them. They got to ask them how things were going. And family is important. And all sides of the family are important as long as it's a healthy environment.
What would
So,
you say John's case has done to you as a person? What will you remember about this case for the rest of your life?
his fight. I think his fight is something that, I mean, it I've not seen somebody go through what they've gone to and continue to put a smile on your face and show up every day and to continue to put yourself through more. Like he was requesting more things, look at me here, the psychosocial thing, the polygraph, like he was requesting more just because he wanted
He
his
literally
kids.
wanted more. Is there any other test out there? I'll take them. Bring them. Bring them.
Yes.
Like
He even asked me. He asked me, he's like, Ashlyn, do you know of anything else I could be doing? And I'm like, John, you know more than I do. Like, no, I can't think of anything else. But if I do, then I would definitely let you know. But just
I tell you, he spent a
yeah,
lot of money on experts and stuff too,
yes, he
trying
did.
to get that innocence.
And he
I
never
mean,
once complained. Never once
no,
complained about it. That man would work extra hours. I don't know if it's been said, but he picked up doing like Uber or Lyft, I think
I
it
did.
was, to help supplement. That wasn't really talked about. Paxair was talked about, but he did pick up the Uber and Lyft. So not only was he driving for these visits to come see the kids, he would also do Lyft so that he could make some money too while he was here and stuff. And when those visits would cancel, he would pick up doing Lyft. So he
Well,
was always
he had
working,
another
trying to
job there
provide.
too. He did
Hmm.
Uber, and there's somewhere in Lewiston where they make ammo for
Oh,
guns.
when he moved here, see, that's the other thing too, is he left his home in North Dakota and moved to Lewiston in roughly August of 2020 so that COVID wasn't an issue, so that he could be here closer to see his kids. And he still was only getting electronic visits when they were allowed. It was asked of me if there was a period of time that John went without visits. Yeah, but not on his accord. It wasn't because of him. He wasn't canceling the visits. He
Right.
moved to a completely different state to be closer to them. But yeah, he worked at the local bullet factory here in Lewiston, ATK or something like that. It changes names quite a bit. I can't keep up with it, but
I tell people
uh,
it's one of the details that I it's etched into my mind because unfortunately, the first and only time I got to meet John in person was standing over his casket. And that was 2 months later after him being on here. And at that point in time, I had done some pretty serious cases with Dad Talk. I didn't know that was what was going to be in Dad Talk's future. And I remember just sitting there looking at him like, you came to me to get your story out. And like trying to wrap my head around it. Like, I just interviewed this guy. He just told me, Eric, I need your help to get this story out. And I'm looking at him. And as I looked down, Ashlyn, I saw his hands and they were stained. You could see, I think, from where he had been making the bullets with the gunpowder and everything, but you could see his hands. They were working hands. The guy had been working himself to the bone.
Yeah.
And he did all of that for those kids. But it was one of the things that me to this day is just seeing him there like that. Nobody should have to go through this. Nobody.
No, absolutely not. You know, and that's we've talked about, you know, how much he requested to be done, the testings and everything, you know, the travel and all of that. But then you bring up, he came to you for Dad Talk. If you were innocent, why would you want your story out there like that?
You're not.
I mean,
and that's what I said.
If there's, yes. I'm sorry, not if you're innocent. If you're guilty, I meant to say if you're guilty, why would you want your story out there?
Those guys don't want to be anywhere near the media. They don't want to be anywhere near the camera or anything like that. Get away from me,
right?
Because they know. I mean, they're usually sleazeballs.
Correct.
But no, you're absolutely right. John went through every avenue he could and did everything, you know. Guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I know it's Sunday night and the work week is coming up next week. And I appreciate all the viewers for coming in here. Listen, the reason I'm doing this is, and I've said this, Ashlyn, unfortunately, John was the first of these cases that are reported on, but he'll be far from the last. I've reported on so many since then. We just had a new one that we reported on a couple of weeks ago, but we will do these cases. And then a week or two later, you know, after something big happens, people start going away. I don't want you to go away because we got to do something about this, guys. I want these dads to stop dying. And I want to make sure John's case that we take this historic win and we keep building off of it. So tomorrow night, Kevin Hickey will be on here and he can answer your questions and take your comments about what happened during the case. If you watched the two attorneys in this case over the past week, they absolutely rock and rolled, kicked ass.
They were awesome.
Oh yes.
You know, I didn't know that they didn't. I didn't know that they didn't really know each other prior to all of this. You would have not guessed that, man. Those two worked so well together. I was impressed. And they were just overall, not only were they awesome attorneys, they were really cool guys too. Like they're great. Yeah. They were great.
I've known Kevin for years. Like, he was involved in John's case from, you know, the custody case before John got killed.
Yeah.
What really impressed me was Joe Miller. Well, I was definitely impressed with Kevin. Don't take that the wrong way. But Joe Miller, to come in there unaware of the situation and to learn the timeline that we're talking about. Like, I really would like to get a third documentary out. But one of my biggest worries is if I have to hire an editor, how much money it's going to cost me just to get an editor to sit down and learn the story. Because if you don't know the story, you can't do the editing. And it's so much to consume. And Joe did it. Him and Kevin, the way they did it, it was amazing, guys. So he'll be on tomorrow night. I'm going to try to keep the story out on the forefront. I talked to two of the jurors that said that they would like to come on as well. And then I'll be leaving later on this week. So please join us if you would like to support our efforts, what we're doing here. Cash App, Venmo, Dad Talk Today, no spaces. It helps us out a lot. Or PayPal, localproductions@yahoo.com. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, comment. I love the hashtag I Stand With John's being everywhere. That's how we help get this story out. But if everybody at this moment would please help me in saying thank you to you, Ashlyn, for doing what you did in this case. You didn't have to do the things that you did, but you did. And I'm just so appreciative. And what really breaks my heart is to know you're no longer doing this. You're no longer in that business. And you were
No.
one of the very rare ones that could catch on to this and did what you were actually supposed to do. So it hurts my heart to know that you're not in that position anymore. Would you like to get back into it?
Yes and no. State
Yes.
cases, probably not. Family law, I did prefer those, but and this is kind of funny and not funny, but I had done supervised visits for, gosh, 8 years or so, and took a year off after we had some loss in our family. And I thought I was done because you see some rough things with the state. You have some rough kids that you're working with. And, there were multiple times I thought windows in my vehicle were going to be broke out. Backs of
Yeah.
seats of my vehicles were going to be kicked out, not by parents, but by kids. And being a mom, like, you've got that stress at work and then coming home and you got your own kids. And so I thought I was done. And I call them my mentors. There's a couple here that they reached out to me and they're like, Ashlyn, what would it take to get you back into doing visits? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I didn't think that I could do it and stuff. And they asked me to volunteer on a case, a local case. And so I did. I volunteered. And after that very first time back in the room of doing a visit, I was like, I've missed this. Like, I actually had missed it.
It's, it's
So
real.
I,
It's real. You're impacting people's lives,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's just it. Like, I'm not a his side, her side kind of person. I like going for what's right, where the
That's
truth
it.
is, and letting the truth be seen.
Well, if you're wanting to know how you did, I think Anthony and Michael Perez, how do we get her back?
And he's from Louis. You know what? I don't know if he wants me saying this or not, but that's the gentleman. He donated his Airbnb to us the whole week
Oh,
while
thank
we
you,
were there.
Anthony.
And I didn't have to
Thank
pay
you
a
for that.
dime. I didn't have to
Yeah,
pay a dime for me or my partner to be there to cover that trial. And it's because of that guy right there. So he
that's cool.
deserves a thank you too. But
Yeah,
he's wanting to know how
definitely.
they get you back in the business down there.
I don't know. Life's kind of crazy at the moment, in my own personal life. So I gotta kind of sort that out first before I think about going back into it. It
That's a
is
good one. You
something
want
that
to pull it up from Holly.
I definitely am very passionate about. Um, you know, I, I've seen so many parents that just don't get the help that they need, necessarily from everybody. And it, I'm definitely not one of those, all dads are guilty of this. I'm definitely let's give dads a chance to
Yes.
be dads. They need to be
And not
dads too. I
everybody.
mean, that
Yeah.
child is 50% their genetics too. And it's not fair that they have to fight so much and moms don't always. And I mean, and I'm a mom, and so
That's a
dads are just
question
as
that I do
important.
need to get out to you before you leave, though. Seeing what you've seen in John's case, seeing what happened in the family courts to begin with, how he had to fight for the children and how he was kept away, seeing what happened in that murder trial and how it got dropped to voluntary manslaughter. What's your feeling on the family courts? Do you think the family courts are actually doing what they are supposed to be doing?
Oof, that's a tough one. Um, um, just so I've seen things from different sides as being
Right.
a foster parent myself and an adoptive mom, and so I've seen different angles of family courts, and no, I think there's so many kids that and families that just don't get justice.
Nope.
Whether it's, a family, I guess, yeah, there's kids that are left in limbo a lot and left in uncertainty. And it's just, it's very unfortunate. I don't think that things are handled the way that they should.
You got to see this behind the scenes more than me. I talk to people all the time, and I'm usually talking to the parents. You was actually in the background seeing it, but in my experience, from what I've seen, when it comes to the family courts or CPS, it seems like they get very involved in cases that they do not need to be involved in. And then in the cases they need to be involved in, there's not enough time and they're dropping the ball.
You couldn't have said that better. I had a case that I worked, can't give any details on it, but it's probably, gosh, 9 years in the making for a family that is still fighting, and the kids don't have justice and they don't have permanency in their life. And when I first became a foster parent, it was if kids had been in out-of-home placement 15 out of the last 19 months, then they had a right to permanency and a right to, I guess, basically move on with life. And it's not like that anymore. Like I said, this case has been going on a long time, and it's not the only one. There's multiple of them that go on. And, like you said, there's cases that they put a lot into, and, I can speak to my own personal situations. So kids that I have adopted in my home, their parents didn't do the extent of some of these other parents that I have seen, and their rights were taken right away, whereas in other cases, you wouldn't even imagine what has gone on, and it's still an open case forever.
They said it was probably too late, but I got something from the Mast family for you. Said, we were so grateful Ashlyn was willing to testify. Honestly, don't think the jury would have landed that verdict without her. So they just wanted you to know how much they appreciate you and everything. Yeah. And from this community to you as well, because John's case has been one that I don't think I've ever been involved in a case as much as I have with this one. So it just hits home in a different way. But yeah, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Again, make sure like, share, subscribe. And if you would like to get in contact with me, make sure to go see our newly revamped website over there at dadtalktoday.com. That was designed by the pissed off parent, Dwayne Ward. You did a really good job, but we've got different things. I'm offering now, if you'd like a mini documentary or something like I did for John, contact me over there. We're willing to do some stuff, but you got to do your work too, but we'll talk about it. And Ashlyn, anything
Can I
you would
add
like?
one last piece? Yeah.
Yep.
One last piece that I'd like to add. Over this last week, I have heard everybody say, they couldn't have done it without me, that my piece was so significant to everything. And this entire time, like, I've not viewed it as that. Like, I just thought that I had one little piece to the puzzle, and I didn't feel like what I was doing for John was that big. Like, I've done visits for 13 years. So it was just another visit for me, sort of thing. And to hear that, how much of an impact my service provided to him and his family has been, I've just kind of been in awe of it. Because like I said, to me, I didn't think that I was doing anything that great, that big. All I was doing was trying to provide him time to see his kids as he needed. He deserved it, every bit of it. So
you don't even have to be doing this podcast now. So that speaks a lot to your character and everything. Right. And I wish we would have had you at the first trial. I think it would have made a world of difference.
Me too. Really. I was, and I don't know if this ever had come out before, but I did talk to Detective Crane early on and things. And I was like, if you need me, I'm here. Like, here's my number. This is what I have. And actually, so that just actually made me think, I did report what James said to Detective Crane, and that's why I talked to him, actually, was to let him know what James had shared with me.
Gotcha.
I hadn't even thought about that really until just now, but yeah.
We need to have her back on. We've got another
Yeah,
5 hours more.
I was gonna say, I think this won't be the only time Ashlin's on Dad Talk. I have a feeling. We'll probably have to get
Cool.
you back on again in the future.
I'll do it.
Thank you
You just let
again.
me know. Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right, guys. Everybody,
All right.
thank you for coming. And Ashlyn, we'll see you again next time.
Sounds good. Thank you.